All right, hello, welcome back. I'm glad you've rejoined me. Today in this session, we're going to talk about the nutrition piece of the little acronym. And if you can remember back to our little acronym, we had 5 things to do every day: nutrition, exercise, education, drugs, self-monitoring. So this one we're going to talk about now is nutrition. And this is a critical piece of the puzzle for many people who have diabetes. In fact, I would say it's probably the most common question that I get about how to manage diabetes is simply, what do I eat? And there are many ways that you can plan a menu. I'm going to show you 4 today. I'm going to talk about 4, but I'm going to spend the majority of my time talking about 1. So there are 4 strategies that you can use to manage your diabetes. And the first one I'm going to talk to you about is the very easiest one. It's also the least effective. So as we progress, each time I talk to you about a different nutritional strategy, it's going to be more complex but more effective. So the first one, for many people who are first diagnosed with diabetes, they have no meal plan at all. They eat pizza and donuts and cakes and ice cream, and they're overweight. They have no idea what to eat. They're just at a loss. What in the world do I eat? And this system is extremely simple, and this is just called adding. And what we would do with this program is just add in about 5 or more pieces of fruit every day. We're not taking away anything. We're not saying give up your donuts, give up your ice cream, give up your cakes, adopt a real rigid meal. We're simply asking that you eat 5 servings of fruit per day. Now, why would that work? Well, if you eat 5 apples, I think there's a good chance that if you lay those 5 apples out on the counter and say, before the sun goes down, I've got to eat those 5 apples, is that those 5 apples take up some room in your intestine, and you say there's just not room for those other things. If you say, I normally have pack of peanut butter crackers and a Coke, or maybe have a donut or a mid-afternoon snack, but instead I have to eat the apple and the snack, it's just more than I can handle. So if I put those apples in, and I say these are non-negotiable, then your other part, by a mathematical equation, just goes down. There's not room to continue eating like you were. Not the best plan, but for many people, it's doable. If I say don't change a thing, just add 5 apples a day in your diet, it's a good place to start while we're working on our strategy. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is very common for people who have diabetes, a little harder but more effective, and this is called carb counting. We know that people with diabetes have difficulty metabolizing things that have sugars in them. Those could be glucose, fructose, natural sugars. We get sometimes things like potatoes and starches will turn into sugar, so those are usually seen as bad, but they're really not. In your daily meals, there are 3 kinds of nutrition that you need, 3 macronutrients. And the first one is protein. Protein, those are meats, and those would be beef, chicken, pork, or fish. You can get them in beans, but primarily those are protein. The second one are things that are considered fat. Those are oily. Usually that's mayonnaise, butter, could be bacon, things that are high in fat. And oddly enough, those 2, protein and fat, do not affect your blood sugar. I'll say that again because it doesn't sound right to you. Protein and fat do not drive up blood sugar. Your body uses the third one, carbohydrates, as the primary way to make sugar in your bloodstream. So what dietitians have discovered is that if we just don't count the protein, don't count the fat, and only focus on the carbs, then our sugars begin to normalize, and that is right. There are ways to cheat this system. You could say, well, are you saying that I can eat as much meat as I want and as much butter as I want? So I could have a 64-ounce porterhouse steak and a stick of butter as long as I have my right number of carbs. I would say your blood sugars will begin to normalize, but you'll probably gain weight. And for many people, the extra weight makes it difficult to manage their diabetes. So it's not healthy, and intuitively, I shouldn't eat a stick of butter and a 64-ounce steak. That's too much. But what many people say is, counting carbs is a little difficult for me, and I don't want to to confuse that with protein and fats on top of that, it's just too complicated. And so they only count the carbs. And what nutritionists have discovered is that at each meal, we need about 3 to 4 servings of a carbohydrate. A serving is 15 grams of a carbohydrate. So 2 servings would be 30 grams. 3 servings would be 45. 4 servings would be 60 grams of carbohydrate. And so anything that gives you 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate would satisfy your requirement for that meal. We know that a piece of fruit has about 15 grams of carbohydrate. And so if you wanted to make it super simple, you could say, I'm going to eat 3 apples, a little bit of beef, and a little bit of butter. And nutritionally, that meets the guidelines, even though you would say that's gross. I don't want to eat that. That's not a healthy way to eat. What most people would do, they would say, well, I don't want 3 apples. I might eat 1. What could I swap for 2 of those apples? And so most foods have a food label. We'll say, for instance, I'd rather have a baked potato. Okay, well, a baked potato has maybe 30 carbs. So now I can have an apple and a potato, which gives me 2, plus the apple, which gives me 3. You might say, but I'm allowed to have 4. So you say I need 15 more grams of a carb. That might be a roll. It might be a serving of green beans. It might be corn. You look on the label and see what gives you that 15 grams in a serving. And for each meal, we need about 3 to 4 servings of a carbohydrate. So for breakfast, we would say, okay, I need 3 servings. So that might be orange juice, half a bagel, and maybe a banana. So that would meet your carb requirements. And then you say, well, I'd like an egg. How many carbs in an egg? None. So I could have an egg, yes. 2 eggs, in theory, yes. And fat also might be a strip of bacon. It will make you gain weight, as we talked about, but it does not have carbs. So a good breakfast, if we're counting carbs, would be maybe a glass of orange juice, half a bagel. Depending on the size of the bagel, some bagels have 50 grams of carbohydrate in one bagel. So a half a bagel would give you 25, and that's almost 2 servings. So you might say, I'm going to eat a banana, half a bagel, boiled egg, and a strip of bacon. That carb, if you're counting carbs, that means your meal is correct for that meal. And then at lunch, you would just say, all right, now I need to find 3 to 4 servings, which would be 45 to 60 grams of carb for lunch, some protein and some fat. And most people who follow carb counting find it easy because they only count the carbs. When they get 45 grams, that's it for the meal, and they stop. So that's the second way. The third way that I'm going to talk to you about is called the rule of hand. And this one brings into play protein and fat. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how much protein and how much fat we should get at each meal. And this one is a little more difficult, but also more effective. So the way this one works, the premise is that your hand represents all that you need for your menu. So we would say that the protein portion of your meal would look like the palm of your hand. So if you ate a hamburger patty, it would be about that thick, and it would be about the shape of your palm. It could be a pork chop, it could be a piece of fish, a piece of chicken, but about the size of the palm of your hand. The amount of fat that you need would be the tip of your thumb. So if you wanted to use a pat of butter, it would look about the same shape as that tip of your thumb. And so we're restricting both fat and protein, even though they really do not affect your blood sugar. They help you feel better. And this is a closer proximity to what will make you feel the best. And then if we go back to our rule of hand, we've talked about the protein is your palm, the fat is the tip of your finger, and each finger would represent a serving of carbohydrate. So 15, 30, 45, 60. What some people do, they say, I like a snack. So they might say, I'm going to eat these 3 for my lunch, and I'm going to save this one for my snack. And so this rule of hand would be right for each meal. So let's suppose that we want to go to, let's say, Chick-fil-A. And we say, I need to follow this rule of hand at Chick-fil-A. Well, what can I eat? Well, what does Chick-fil-A serve that looks about like this? That would be a chicken breast. So you might say, all right, I'm going to do a chicken sandwich. So I'm going to do if I do the grill one, then it's only protein. There are no carbs. So this would satisfy the requirement to use that chicken breast as my protein. You might say, I want to do a bun. And on the food label, if you look, they'll say a bun has 45 grams of carbohydrate. So the top has 22, the bottom has 22. So we're getting about 45 grams. So that would be 15, 30, 45. That would be all of the carbs in that bun. But now I have a chicken breast. I have my bun. I might use a little mayonnaise for my fat, about the size of my thumb, and I put the mayonnaise on my grilled chicken. And then for this fourth one, instead of fries, I would do a fruit cup. So if I do my chicken breast, my bun, and a fruit cup, and some unsweet tea, then I've met this rule. And that's a good lunch. You say, oh, I had a grilled chicken sandwich and a fruit cup and some unsweetened tea, and that was good. And then when you come home for supper, you say, okay, now I've got to find something for supper. I'm going to do a grilled hamburger patty. I'm going to do some steamed vegetables. I'm going to do a baked potato. I'm going to do a little roll, and I'm going to save this fourth carb as a snack. I'd like a little piece of fruit before I go to bed. And now you've met the guidelines for the rule of hand for supper. So this one is a little more complicated because now we're talking about protein and fat instead of just the carbs. A little more complicated. But what I found with this particular strategy is that people feel the best. When they eat this ratio, they say to me traditionally, I just feel good. Even if my blood sugars are not where I want them to be, I love eating like this rule of hand. I feel really healthy and really good. I just like the way I feel. And this is normally what I recommend to people because it's pretty easy and it is pretty easy to pick up the concept. You might want to watch the video a couple of times to get it nailed down really close. So let me go over this again one more time for you as a recap. The rule of hand follows the hand as your guideline for each meal. So we have one for breakfast, one for supper, and a third one for dinner. So we do all three meals following this rule of hand. And at each meal, we need some protein, which is the size of the palm of your hand. We need some fat at each meal, which could be butter, oil, and we need 3 to 4 servings of carbs at each meal. So that we do this at breakfast, we do this at lunch, we do this at supper. And when we follow that, our blood sugars begin to normalize. We feel better. Many people lose weight, even though that's not the goal. Following this rule becomes about 12 to 1,500 calories a day, which for most people is not a real rapid weight loss, but usually some. Also on your hand, the size of fruit, we can approximate by the size of our fist. So if we're going to pick an apple, I'm a big old guy. I'll get a big apple. Some frail little ladies get a small apple, but we approximate the size of our fruit serving by the size of our fist. Our protein is the shape of our palm, and our fat is the shape of this little tip of your thumb. So that's how the rule of hand works. Now, the fourth one that is the most difficult, the most complex, is also the most effective, and this is called the ADA exchange. I used to teach this. I really don't anymore. It's so difficult that for many people it's exhausting. And this strategy says that there are 6 food groups, and at each meal you have to eat something off of each list. So you would say, all right, I need to eat something off the protein list. So then I have to pick a serving of protein, and then I have to pick a serving of fat, and then I have to pick a serving of milk, then I have to pick a serving of fruits, and they're different fruits. They're laid out as juices and solid fruits. There are also vegetables, which are broken down into starchy vegetables and also regular vegetables. Like we know that a potato has more carbs than a green bean, even though they're both vegetables. They're treated differently and they belong on different lists. Each list, we have to pick something off of each list. Very difficult. It's hard to do that. There are some publications. The American Diabetes Association has put out a publication called Month of Meals. You can order this. It's about $30. You can order it off of Amazon. But what they have done, they've met with their dietitians and they put together 30 different days of food. So they have 30 breakfasts, they have 30 lunches, 30 suppers, and they follow the ADA exchange. So it's already laid out for you. They'll say, For instance, they might say supper is a London beef broil with a garden salad, and they have the recipe, and you don't really have to think, how do I put peas and brown rice and milk and cheese and which fat and how do I do it? It's already put together for you. Many people like this. It is a lot of time in the kitchen. It's very rigid, but it provides the best control. If you have been in the hospital and the doctor has said, I want them on a 1,200 calorie ADA diet, this is the diet you've eaten in the hospital. The dietitians follow this very closely. So those are the 4 ways that you can get your meals under control. So let's go over them again in the order of ease and effectiveness. So the easiest one to use and the least effective is simply adding. And here we just add fruit into our diet. We try and eat 5 servings of fruit a day. For many people, they say that seems like that's not enough, but for some people who are overwhelmed, great starting place. The second thing we talked about was carb counting. In carb counting, we only count the carbohydrates. We do not count proteins. We do not count fats, only carbs, since those are the things that most affect blood sugar. The third one was the rule of hand, and this is the guideline for each meal, which is protein, fat, and carbs. And the last one is the ADA exchange, which you would need to get it from your dietitian. They'll provide you with that. Very intensive. You can also order the ADA month of meals. If you really want to get after it and you want to do your very best, it's the ADA exchange. Hope that's been helpful for you, and I thank you for tuning in today.